if we're going to be followers of Christ, we've got to follow the way of friendship, and we've got to offer ourselves as a friend and know that when we do that, that pleases God.
Welcome to She Leads, a podcast about leadership, faith, and relationships. I'm your host, Thea, and I'm so glad that you tuned in today. Thank you for supporting the podcast, sharing, liking, subscribing, following, all those words. They actually mean something. They actually make a difference. So I invite you to continue to not only enjoy for yourself, but share these episodes with a friend. Also want to invite you into the conversation. Every week, I'd love to hear from you, your feedback, questions, comments, and you can send those to sheleadscomments@gmail.com. Today, I want to read one from our Healing Forward episode with Amy Vogel. The listener says, I love that Amy sits with a Bible verse for a month in her devotional. That is moving. I also was really intrigued by that idea of really sitting and truly meditating on the word. So thank you for your comments. And thank you again, Amy, for being on the show. Today, I have my friends Kate and Lataya back for round 2 to continue to talk about friendships and faith. But go ahead and reintroduce yourselves and tell us, what are you consuming these days? What are you a fan of?
Okay. I am Kate Flint. I am one of the pastors at St. Paul's United Methodist Church, serving in children and special needs ministries. And lately I have been listening to a lot of audiobooks through the public library. I just go one after another, lots of books. And podcasts. I have a long commute, so anything I can listen to helps me out tremendously. So I'm really enjoying Pulpit Fiction. It's a lectionary podcast that helps me with my sermon and lesson prep every week. And there's one called Clean With Me, where they just body double and talk you through cleaning your house. I'd like to say I clean my house while I listen to it, but I actually don't. But it is very relaxing to listen to someone else clean their kitchen and describe it. So if you need some stress relief in your life. But yeah.
Love it.
That's what I'm doing lately.
Awesome. Well, I'm Lataya Simpson. I'm the pastor at St. Matthew's United Methodist Church in North Houston in the Independence Heights area. And I love serving as a pastor. It is very time-consuming, spirit-consuming, energy-consuming, heart-consuming. And so I find myself working a lot. I'll find myself still working at 1 a.m. sometimes on my computer, wanting to make this better or that better. And so I have been very intentional lately about consuming fiction. I've been reading actual books with pages, listening to audibles, reading on Kindle, and Netflix has been a friend. So watching old shows that came on so that my brain can shut off has been helpful. I also like to listen to podcasts. One of them, in fact, Kate recommended to me, was The Autism Pastor. I started listening to that again. Really powerful message there. And of course, I listen to She Leads every week. And so those are some of the things that I'm consuming.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So let's jump back into a conversation about friendships. And I want to start by asking, how can friendships and faith be connective? And even, what's the significance of friendships on your faith journey?
Well, I think the example we get from God, our understanding of God as the Holy Trinity, is relational at the core. And so I think we are created to be relational beings. We are in the image of a relational God, and so we're supposed to seek out friendships. Our family relationships are important. Our romantic relationships are important, but also the friends. This chosen family we go through life with. It's connected in doing what God has created us to do.
I think that's fantastic. I love that. I think I've heard you say that as well. The Trinity reminds us that God's own self is relational with God's own self. And that's so beautiful to think about it that way. As a Christian, my faith tradition is as a Christian, and the early believers call that following the way, Following Christ was the way, and it was the way of Christ. And what was the way of Christ? The way of Christ was to make friends. He was always in somebody's house. He was always over having dinner, teaching and preaching with friends. He picked 12 close friends to go with him, and we call them disciples, but he called them friend. And so if we're going to be followers of Christ, we've got to follow the way of friendship, and we've got to offer ourselves as a friend and know that when we do that, that pleases God. And if it doesn't work out, that's not on us. That's okay. Friendship has to be a priority for us in our faith journey, and it really does enrich the faith journey, because then I can call on that friend to not only have dinner and share a recipe or share time, but hey, can you pray for me? Hey friend, can you help me because I've fallen short, and help me get on the right path? Or they can point out to me, or I can point out to them, hey, I think you might need some help here that I may not be recognizing on my own. So friends can be a mirror for us. And when we do that in faith, they're a good mirror in our lives as well.
Yeah. And just remembering that, it's Jesus in those middle John chapters about, in that final night, where he tells them, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. And every time I come to the communion table in a contemporary setting, I'm able to say, Jesus was his friends, and he laid it all out. He revealed everything. He left nothing, held back that night. And it's through that friendship that I believe that he had hoped they could receive it, right? That they could hear him and know the truth about who he really is and what was ahead for himself and for them, and still what that would really mean. Again, that friendship and that relationship. And I know for me, it's been the friendships along the way that have, helped me in my faith journey. Definitely you two women, and there's others that have just been willing to truly come alongside, continue to pray with me, for me along that journey, and reveal how God is at work in them too. Isn't this why we all want small groups, right? Is say, hey, get in a circle with some other people and get real and honest, and not only with what's going on with you, but then also this idea of a mirror or a window into, this is how God's at work. And when I see God at work in your life, I'm able to see, because that's who God is. That's God's nature. And I can find ways God is doing the same in my own through those friendships. So what can we do as the church, as Christian leaders, as pastors? What can we do to foster friendships?
I think we really do need to be thinking about this question. How can we foster friendship? How can we facilitate space so that people feel safe and secure and whole and real? And so we've got to build those friendships as pastors. We can't just be a leader who's so set apart that we don't really know the people well, that we know about them, but we don't know them and they don't know us. When we begin to allow them to know us and we begin to know them, we can see what the actual need is rather than coming up with a plan that may not actually work. And knowing that whatever plan we come up with may not work, but beginning to create space for friendship with our parishioners, with them and not just for them. I think that's the first good step.
Yeah.
This is something we've talked a lot about in my congregation as well. Just how do we build these relationships? How do we make friends at church? And I know working with the children, there's more of a comfort level with just explicitly teaching how to be a friend. That's what people bring their children to church to learn in part, is not just the content, but the character traits of, being a good listener, being trustworthy, these kinds of things that we explicitly teach children that we need to learn. And then we can also teach that to adults, maybe not as heavy-handedly, but talking about that, as well as naming loneliness as something we are feeling, naming that need for community and need for connection. Because I think it's out there. People are feeling that loneliness, especially in recent years, but even before that, the disconnectedness of our busy lives and all of that. And so I think it's important for the church to say, yeah, we get that, and we want you to be in community, and then setting things up to build that, whether it's at my church, we call it Fellowship Friday, and it's quarterly dinner parties based on neighborhoods of where people in our church are from. And then just hangout time, not overscheduling your volunteers so much that they don't have time to take a breath and just visit.
Yeah.
But getting to serve in teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind as Kate was talking is, why don't we do sermon series on friendship? Why don't we do Bible studies on friendship? Why don't we talk about this more? Well, because we don't always remember that we need it. And if we're not remembering as leaders, then we're not leading people toward it. And so we've got to be really intentional, not only about our friendships, but about helping other people foster friendship, true friendship. And I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to do a sermon series on friendship and maybe share the stories of some of the friendships that I've had with people that have impacted me, and how those types of stories relate to Scripture, and what type of friendships do we see modeled for us in Scripture. I think that can help us let down some of those walls and begin to value friendship more in this society where we have become very self-focused. We can become more other-focused.
Yeah. Well, and in a world where the word friend has totally changed meaning, right? I think about older generations, and that word friend is someone who you can call in the middle of the night, on the side of the road, through a payphone. And they're going to answer. They're going to come and get you. And as you apologize about whatever reason you're there, they're going to say, don't mention it. You know? And whereas today in our world, the word friend is someone who is willing to follow you at a distance and randomly like your curated suggestions of what's really going on, you know, and how just that complete difference in that reality. And and I also love what you said, Lataya, about how, well, we gotta be willing to make friends. We gotta be willing to be known and to know others. And it just goes back to, one of my favorites, Craig Rochelle. He says, you're not allowed to say our people won't. You gotta say we haven't led them to.
Ooh.
And if our churches are not full of people who have real friendships, I can promise most of those pastors don't either. Because when we as leaders are unwilling to be vulnerable and be real, and whether it's, how close you go that route with your parishioners, but also that they know about your friends. I mean, I've had bosses where I'm like, who are your friends? Because you only talk about people who come here. We've got to be more adamant about that and noticing where we can make those friends. What are some maybe pitfalls or problems we should also be mindful of as we try and lead people to make more friends?
Not trying to force it. Just because there's an affinity group doesn't mean they're all going to get along. Doesn't mean they're meant to be friends. So avoiding the affinity group pitfall, avoiding, I don't want to just be friends with young people. When I was young, that wasn't always appealing to me. I didn't want to be excluded from the group of people who were different. And so sometimes in our efforts in the life of the church to create these safe spaces that people can feel comfortable, we're forcing them into this cookie cutter that they don't fit. So I think we need to be very mindful of creating more than one type of space and creating more open doors to the spaces that exist, rather than, if you have this one small group that's been around for 20 years and it's sometimes a very closed off group, but there may be someone who needs a group of stable individuals who can love them well, and we're not pushing that. I mean, I think that's one of the pitfalls of the church is we let people get way too comfortable, who have been in the church forever, not being as welcoming and hospitable as they should. And so the pitfalls that we should avoid are just trying to lock people into too many cookie cutter groups, and also not reminding the more mature Christians to be hospitable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think with any friend group in or out of the church, there's a temptation to be cliquey, to be us and them. The original members of this Sunday school class versus the newcomers. They've been here 10 years now, but they're still the newcomers because they weren't the founding members, But I think, that not being open to change, to the natural process of flowing in, flowing out of groups. There's also a temptation to gossip, and that's something, we criticize ourselves for, that is a big criticism of church people, that can be judgmental or can be, well, that's too worldly. I don't hang out with those people. I only hang out with my church people.
Yeah.
And then turning around and talking about our church people in a way that's not edifying. I remember from way back our first year of school, some of us were going out to lunch. We were in the car driving to lunch, and the conversation drifted to speculating about the personal life of a university employee we had in common. And Thea, you shut it down. You said, y'all, this is inappropriate. That is not our business. And I was thinking, wow. You could have gone along with it because we were new friends. We were trying to get in good with each other, and sometimes gossip is how we do that. But and you're like, no, it's not behavior becoming of us. And I really respected that, and that's helped me think about, hey, we can do that and not make it awkward, but hold each other to a higher standard. Rather than just going with some of the easy ways to score points, which can be criticizing others or, spreading gossip, that sort of thing.
I really like that you mentioned that. I mean, I vaguely remember that now that you brought it up, but the fact of maybe what we can do as Christians is in wherever we find ourselves in new circles is to be able to say, hey, that's not kind, and I think especially when it comes to church gossip and the prayer list even, you know what I mean? Of being like, hey, actually, could we actually pray and not talk about how we're going to be praying for so-and-so? And, those kinds of things of really leaning it back to that and holding the true value of those connections and that vulnerability. And really, holding one another accountable to that and saying, I've had to look at a few relationships and say, well, if we're not talking about so-and-so, do we have a relationship? And really ask myself that. And that's hard to do. And even if it's this idea, well, we've experienced something together and things like that, but we've got to have more in common than this. And then as Christians and as church leaders to kind of lead our groups in that way too. What about this idea of having a friendship with Jesus? I think this, when I think of that phrase, I actually think more back to my pre-following Jesus days where people would kind of talk about that. And I would think, well, that's just some sort of, I don't know, weird thing those church people say, but what is that idea like to think of really having a friendship with Jesus? Do you use that term? Is that how you would describe your relationship with Christ?
I think it's definitely one way that I would describe my relationship with Christ, and it's not to take away from God being sovereign, that Jesus is Lord, but he also called us friend. And so if we're going to live into what he said in his time on this earth, if he's going to call us friend, then we need to call him friend too. And the song "I Am a Friend of God" always comes to mind.
Yep.
It's so popular, so catchy. But when I hear that song, I'm reminded that he calls me friend. And how can I be a friend in return? How can I meet the need of friendship that he's asking for? And spending time with Christ in prayer and being his hands and feet. You know, it's just like if Kate needed a favor and Kate couldn't get out, or you needed a favor and you couldn't get out and do the thing that you needed, I would happily go and be your hands and feet and go to the grocery store for you, or go take your mother to the doctor if you needed me to. I mean, that's not something you've ever asked me to do, but I absolutely would, because I'm your friend. Well, what does Christ need from us as he has ascended into heaven and is not here doing ministry in the physical sense? Christ needs us to be the friend to one another. And when we are friends with others, we are friends with Christ. But also spending that alone time with him and appreciating him and singing to him and eating with him. And when we break that bread and we drink of that cup, recognizing that he's calling us friend, it's a joy.
Yeah.
It's a joy. And in the morning, sometimes I just sit with the hymns and say, "Be still, my soul. The Lord is on my side. Wait patiently. Know that he is near." And so being a friend with Christ, knowing that Jesus is a person, but is also fully God, fully human, but has ascended into heaven, is not physically present with us. He is. He is present with us. We may not be able to see him face to face, but I do when I look at you. I do when I look at you. You do when you look at me, because he does live in us and through us. That it's real.
Yeah.
It's realized. It is both real and realized if we're willing to allow it to be realized in us.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the song, and it brought me to Maverick City's Communion. And at the end of that song, they start to sing, "What a friend you have in Jesus." But that song, Communion, this idea that, you know, we are one with God. First in the garden, but again at the table. And this reality that, like you said, that Jesus would dare call us a friend and would welcome us close and reveal his whole self. I mean, when I think about a friendship with Jesus, I want to be like, "Oh, I'm not worthy. I'm not a good friend. I never called Jesus back." But when I think about his willingness to be my friend and to offer his whole self, to be sure I know, it's like, whoa. I mean, what an impact. What a powerful testament of, again, this relational God that we're able to not just serve, to know and be known by.
You know, there's a joke I've seen going around talking about, well, you know, the real miracle of Jesus that nobody talks about is how he managed to have 12 close friends in his 30s. And you know, the joke the humor comes from, okay, well, we separate that out from like the real miracles, the healing, the multiplying the loaves and fish. But everything he did was teaching, was modeling for us what this way is. And so, yeah, that's, if he chose friendship as a way to go through life, I think that's, in following him, that's important for us to follow that example and be counted as one of those friends. I think having a little bit of a lightheartedness about our faith journey is important in that. I had a friend, very talented artist in high school who had a sketchbook, and he was flipping through one day, and he showed a picture he had drawn cartoon style called Jesus Tells a Joke. And it was Jesus laughing and all of the disciples around him just like crying, laughing. And it was just that moment of camaraderie. And so I think sometimes we make our relationship with God so serious and so very, I have to attend to it like it's homework rather than just an experience of doing life with God, emphasizing that God with usness of Jesus. And so having that friendship is that spending time together. If I'm who I'm talking to while I'm doing the dishes or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love that. I always say my Jesus told jokes.
Oh, yeah.
The socialite that he was, the dinner parties, and sometimes in The Chosen, I don't know if y'all watch it, but there was a scene where he did tell a joke about breakfast and breaking the fast, and I was like, I knew it, I was so excited. But yeah, this idea of enjoying, and as you were talking about that too, I thought about his life and how, we talk a lot about forgiveness and grace, but even in the relationship, right? I mean, Judas was just there, hanging out the whole time. Peter was there, hanging out, and he's just forgiven. And that scene on the beach at the end of John, of just like, you love me? That's what matters. What you did and what you didn't do is not what's going on. And I can see that, in friendships too, again, where this nature of God is reflected back to us through the others. As pastors and just as Christians who care about the church and Christ's holy work, what are your hopes for the church and friendships? What would be?
I hope people will know us by our love. I mean, that's what we're called to show the world. The church, the global community of people who follow Christ are supposed to be known by our love for each other. And so I would hope that we would be able to have those friendships and let that be the most notable thing about us, how we live and serve together, rather than what typically makes the headlines when there's infighting or things like that.
Yeah. My hope for the future of the church in connection with friendship, I hope that people will see church as a place where they can go and make friends. And they can trust that the church is a place where they are going to find a friend and be a friend, and that the people who are already in the life of the church, who maybe they grew up in the church, they've been there since the church was founded, and they feel some type of ownership of the church, that when they welcome people in, that when we welcome people in, as itinerant pastors, we get moved around a lot. So there's not a lot of, oh, this is my church and I've been here forever for us as pastors. But my hope is that we would welcome people with friendship and a true open arm, not just, we're glad you're here, take our mug and sign our paper and get on our newsletter. I'll see you next Sunday. But offer themselves, hey, let's go have coffee. Let's take our kids to the park together. Let's go see a movie and do things that friends do, offer ourselves in ways that friends do, and facilitate that in the church so that there can be safe spaces to do that. Because, no, I'm not going to be comfortable going with the total stranger to the movies, right? But if there's a movie night, we have it at the church, and we know that it has been said, this is so that we can build friendship.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll actually happen. Yeah. Maybe we'll actually live into the call to be a friend, to show that love, not just in great big ways where we need to put it in the newsletter, but ways that are meaningful to the heart, where we're storing up these treasures in heaven. That when we get there, we can say, hey, girl, it's good to see you. I'm so happy to know you already. I don't want to just meet other people when I get there. I want to know them already, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I could just make more friends.
Yeah.
And of course, we have a limited amount of time, but we do have time. And as the church, we can foster and facilitate opportunities and relationships with the people and for the people together alongside, not just from the pulpit, but coming down into the pews, coming down to be whole and real together as a friend.
Yeah. One of my hopes is that we can lead our people to be willing to make new friends. I think what I see a lot is church people can get real busy with church people. And this idea of, we've got to be willing to make new friends who are not already thinking and believing just like us and doing just like us, right? And really that'd be my hope, is that we would start to make new friends with new people who have different beliefs and be willing to be changed, be willing to learn something new, be willing to witness authentically to what we do believe. I heard someone this week offer that if you do not follow Jesus Christ, that he will schedule a 1-hour coffee and lunch with you and just share with you his journey, and while that's maybe a unique way to do it, but I just thought, I don't know any other pastors that have offered that, he's a professor at Rice, who's just like, hey, if you want to know what I know about Jesus, I'm willing to give it to you, and how that might, if we could get a little bit more willing to do that as well, and willing to share this story and being completely honest about what we do believe. Now, I don't think you lay it all down in the first hour, but you got to start somewhere. You got to be willing to meet someone new. If every one of your friends already goes to church, who will you ever evangelize to? Who will you ever spread this good news to? And so that's one of my hopes, is that we can get better at making friends, especially with those who don't think and believe like us. So what would be one of your one step someone could take if they wanted to deepen their relationship with Jesus, wherever they might be on that journey, from complete strangers to long acquaintances?
To pray, to pray and ask God to show you the way of friendship with him, to just earnestly and honestly pray. If that means you color a page to pray, or you sing a song to pray, or you read a liturgy to pray, or you just pray deeply, extemporaneously out of your heart, God, I want to know how to be your friend. I want to be a better friend to you, whatever that looks like. Lord God, show me the way of friendship with you. I think that's the first best step for me.
So saying read the Bible sounds obvious, but something I was able to do this year, and shared this journey with Lataya and her husband and some people, that to just read the Bible start to finish. And I did it on audio because, again, long commute, and not a lot of brain space left over when I get home at the end of the day for sitting down and reading. But I found that I was really looking forward to just sitting in my comfy chair and listening to scripture while I played solitaire on my phone. That was what was relaxing to me. And that just hanging out with scripture. And really, it wasn't Bible study. It wasn't looking at notes and I've got to remember this for the future, or I've got to do my homework. It was just hanging out and spending that time hearing, and whatever sinks in, sinks in. And it felt like hanging out with friends. It was relaxing. And that soaked into my thoughts at other times of day. And I'm like, oh, that's just like what I was hearing in the Bible. Hey, Isaiah just said that. Hey, the words of Jesus said that. And so just keeping that in mind. So I would say hang out with the Bible.
I love it. Thank you both again for being willing to come and share this time. How can listeners connect with you? Where can they find you?
So you can find me at LatayaSimpson.com. You can also visit the website of the church where I serve, which is stmatthewsmethodist.org. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram. So just look for my name and you'll find me, Lataya Simpson. I'm glad to know you.
And I can be found on Facebook, and I'm also on our church website and our YouTube page. So look for stpaulshouston.org. So for the St. Paul's worship videos and things online, you can find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again. And thank you for tuning in. Once again, I'd like to invite you into the conversation. Send your comments, feedback, questions to sheleadscomments@gmail.com. I'm really excited about this opportunity to really strive to build a community. So I want to invite you into that space. Once again, also check out the show notes where you'll find the links to our guests, but as well as a link to the She Leads website where you can learn more about the She Leads story, as well as support She Leads episodes and buy some She Leads merch. So I hope you'll check it out. And thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next time. She Leads is produced by me, Thea Curry-Fuson, recorded and edited by Pearland Podcast Studios. All thoughts and expressions shared by the guests are theirs and not the organizations they're affiliated with. Thanks for tuning in. Check us out next week to continue the conversation on She Leads.